are the reason for all of your success, and you are the reason for all of your failure. Full stop. How can you lead a team if you can't lead yourself? If your life depended on whatever it is that you're doing today, right? Would you go about it differently? Did you leave it all out there? Because anything worth doing is worth doing right.
I've got this right. I'm maybe just doing it wrong. That's the bigger, greater definition of focus for me. If you're the most determined person, but you have no idea what you're doing, hard to succeed. If you're the most focused, but you give up easily, what's the point? So to me, focus includes getting rid of the noise.
Good morning. Second day of summer. Sort of feels like that. No real data overnight, no real data this morning. Kind of coming back from a lazy long weekend, perhaps. US Open this weekend. One of the least popular winners. Gosh, I mean, maybe ever. Boy, the New York crowd is absolutely relentless. Well, one thing to not cheer for someone, one thing to perhaps even jeer for someone, but, actively rooting for balls to go in the rough and in the bunkers and off the green. Brutal. But I guess Wyndham Clark probably drank enough wine last night, per his interview, that it doesn't matter. No data here today. We'll talk real quickly before we get into it about what we've got this week. Before we do that, however, overnight, Asia mostly up, Europe mostly up, indicating, I want to say, mostly up here onshore, although S&P futures down slightly, volatility up. And commodities, I'll say mostly worse. Natural gas is up, silver's up a bit, but everything else is down. And by the way, interestingly enough, including Brent and crude, which is interesting because this on again, off again deal might be off again. Dollar stronger versus most indices, and we were kind of concerned about this deal and talked about how it wasn't signed until it was signed, and then talked about even when it was signed that it's a memorandum of understanding and not an absolute deal. And if it was even a deal, what does that even mean? Stuff about folks walking away from the table and all these videos that I saw over the weekend. So, who knows really where we stand. Bonds, generally speaking, whether it be just recovering from a long weekend, but, anecdotally with yields higher, one would immediately go to folks becoming pessimistic about all this talk about the Strait and the conflict. However, oil prices are down this morning. So, maybe we're still digesting the Fed. Although, as I said, I think generally speaking, the market is a bit offside about that. Although it's complicated. I think Warsh is, generally speaking, a bit more hawkish than folks would have imagined. But by the same token, maybe exponentially more dovish because of his willingness to look at things differently and perhaps in such a way that would tolerate higher inflation. Speaking of the Fed, Alan Greenspan, former Fed chair, died at 100. So data this week. Tomorrow we've got ADP and S&P. On Wednesday, what was that sound? Oh, that's unrelated. That's telling me I've got a call coming up. On Wednesday, really not much. Thursday's the big day, as we talked about last week with PCE in particular. Last revision of GDP I don't know that I care about that, and anyone else really should. Fair amount of Fed speak on Thursday as well. I mean, really a blockbuster day because, you know, one wonders, how much they may or may not talk about a new strategy or the, incoming chair, or if it's just sort of a set speech, so that'll be interesting. And then Michigan sentiment on Friday. And then, sort of an interesting week, the week after, already July 4th, next week. We've got nothing on Monday. We've got JOLTS as the headline on Tuesday. Wednesday, big day. You've got layoffs, ADP, and ISM. And then a Thursday, non-farm payroll with an early close. You want to talk about some fireworks there, pun intended. You're going into a 3.5-day weekend, leading off with non-farm payroll. And wow, that should be pretty interesting. So, as we sort of go gently or not so gently into month end here, by the way, Friday was a pretty solid lock day, at least for us here at EPM. Despite the market being closed, we throw a rate sheet out. Some indication to me that there were some folks that were skeptical about coming back from the long weekend, and somewhat rightfully so. So how do you play this last week of June? Certainly, I trust, last full week of June. Certainly, I trust that if you're not completely locked up for June, you're mostly there. At this point, certainly one would say, what the heck are you waiting for? 10's at 449, about 6 basis points off our best levels of the last few weeks. I think that if you're looking at, 6.5 coupon has softened quite a bit. The 6 is definitely off. I mean, we're off across the board. Our pullback has been pretty broad-based across the stack. 5.5s and 6s have definitely held up the best. So, from an LO standpoint, 5 3/4 to 6 5/8, you haven't gotten hurt too badly. And at that point, I don't necessarily know what you're waiting for if you're not locked up. But, I play a little bit of defense here. 6 3/4 and above. I don't know that you've ever really had anything to lose. And at this point, I probably hold on there. And then the 5 coupon, which is 5 1/4 to 5 5/8. I'm a broken record on this, right? You're either way offside, so what the heck? Just keep praying, or, you're stretching to do that loan anyway, which I really can't advocate. Doing a loan right now for somebody with 2, 3, 4 points, whatever it might be at certain interest rates, I really don't see it. To me, when you're, paying points versus to the other extreme of doing a no-cost loan, that to me is something that should almost entirely be market-based. Obviously, then that once you sort of make a market-based decision, then it certainly becomes a situational decision. Are you going to stay there? You're not going to stay there, so on. But why I say it's a market-based decision, when you're kind of at the market highs, the idea that you should pay points is preposterous. When you're at the market lows, I mean, imagine if there's somebody out there that paid 5 points to get 1 1/4 or whatever you could have gotten. Was there even a 1 coupon? I don't remember. But that would have been genius, right? And so, to me, I would take my lumps here. Do a no point or a no cost loan on the promise that you're going to refinance sometime in the next 18 months. That to me just makes more sense. But so I think you'd be in the 6, 6.5 coupon range. But to whatever extent you're still originating 5, 5.5. That's how I would approach that. Yeah, I don't have a heck of a lot more. So, while I'm kind of in wind down, if you have any questions, post them here. I see a couple people joining late, so I'll try to, just string this out a couple extra minutes. But whatever you missed, go back and watch on replay, as several hundred people do throughout the day. Anyway. If I go back to next week's data, right, and let's dive in here for a second. What are our expectations? That hasn't loaded in. I love to, and maybe we'll be able to do this tomorrow or the next day. If I Google it, let's see, non-farm June expectations. I'm curious to see, and I've gotten to the point where I'm looking. So Wall Street estimates for June non-farm broadly point to job gains ranging from 85 to 130. Employment rate expected to hold steady at 4.2 to 4.3. So that is the market. If I'm to believe, what I am reading, the market sort of feels like this is going to be a slightly softer jobs number. So I particularly going into a holiday weekend, I sort of would have rather have seen us expecting another strong number. It'll be interesting. I think we're going to look really hard at the revisions, on the heels of printing a solid number, and we're going to want to look for some of those internals. This PCE number is going to be, to me, the highlight of the next week and a half, because really all that matters is inflation and being able to tell the narrative that, or perpetuate, because we've already told it, the narrative that this resurgence of inflation is transitory. Yeah, that's about all I've got. I think that I'd be looking hard at 5.5, 6 coupon today. Where are we relative to Thursday? Gosh, we absorbed the roll. I would have hoped that we'd be a little bit more resilient, turning front month to July and picking up some of that drop. But we're going to have to be a little bit patient here. 5-day yields on 10s. We hit 442 on the 16th. We're at 449. So there you have it. Got to be a little bit patient. Got to sit back in your chair. Got to close out this month. And what I'd be doing is I am 70-30 lock for the next week or so. And maybe I'm 50-50 lock float for end of July closings. Remember, bulls and bears make money, pigs get slaughtered. Thanks for joining live. And thanks for everybody that watches on replay. See you tomorrow. Have a great day.